Hey, what's going on guys, Turtywurty here, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.16.4. In this tutorial I'm going to be covering something very simple and very basic, and that is items. Now before I start, I would just like to mention that my Discord server is in the description. In there you can get help with any of your problems. You can use our bots. You can talk about the currently running competition, and a lot more goes on in there as well. So yeah, just like to mention that. Apart from that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So in the last video we went ahead and basically created the base layout for our mod, and now we're going to use that layout. So let's first go into core init, and we'll go into item init. In here we want to go ahead and create a deferred register. Now a deferred register is basically an object that you register stuff to it. It's quite hard to explain, but I will try and show you instead. So what we do is we create a public static final, and that will be a deferred register, and you can just press Control Space to bring up this nice little menu right here. And for the generics, this takes in a basically the type that you want to register. So I want to register an item, and we basically use deferred registers to register most things in the game. So as you can see here, there is an example of how it exactly works. So I'm going to actually call this items, because this is our items registry, and this will be equal to deferred register dot create. Now this will take in first the registry. So the registry, for that we use forge registries dot, and then for items we choose items. And then we just need to put in our mod ID, which we created as a static field in our main class. So that will be tutorial mod.mod ID. Actually, we didn't create the mod ID, of course. So in our main class we can go ahead and create a public static final string, and this will be mod underscore ID, and that will just be equal to our mod ID, so tutorial. And to actually make this a little bit better, we can pass that into here instead of hard coding it everywhere. So tutorial mod.mod ID, just like that. Now if we go back into our item init, we should see our mod ID pops up, which it does. And there you go, that is the deferred register, but that doesn't actually do anything. We haven't done anything, so we actually need to now register it. And the way we do that is via a registry object. So this basically holds the item until it is registered. Well, it holds it after it's registered as well, but this registry object can be null, or it can hold null until it's actually being registered. So we create a public static final registry object, and this once again just takes in the type that this object will hold. So that will be an item, and I'm going to call this example underscore item, and that is just going to be equal to items dot register. So obviously items here being the deferred register up here, so we call the method that has. And as you can see here, this takes in the name, so this needs to be all lowercase. It needs to be, it cannot have any special characters. It must be all lowercase. So basically this will be what the name of our item is in game. So I'm going to just pull this example underscore item. So we use underscores instead of places, instead of spaces. I can't speak today for some reason. There is an underscore here, but it's not showing up because, well, I actually don't know why it's not showing up, but there is an underscore there. You'll have to trust me. And then we use a supplier of a new item, and once that loads, that takes in a properties. So for the properties, we just do a new item dot properties, and once you've done that, you now have an item. Now, to obtain this item in game, you will have to /give. So let's say we want it in a creative tab. What can we do? Well, what we can do is after the properties right here, we can do dot, and then you'll see all these different properties that we can add to this item. So for this video, I am going to just be covering group. So that will be the item group. Item groups are just creative tabs. In the code they call them item groups. So that's basically what they are. In the advanced item videos, in which will be coming shortly after this one, it will come after the block video, we will go ahead and just cover some of the other ones, but for now we're just going to use dot group, maybe dot group, and for this we just use item group dot, and then these are all the different creative tabs. So for this one, I'm just going to put it in MISC, which is the miscellaneous creative tab. And that is it. We now have an item. Except if we load it into the game, our item will not exist. Because we aren't, this deferred register isn't being registered. So we have to register the deferred register, which is a bit confusing and a bit of a tongue twister, but it's actually very simple to do. So we just need to go into our main class, and in the constructor below this method right here, we can go ahead and actually create a field for this. So this returns an I event bus. So we can just go ahead and create a field for that, since we're going to be using it a lot. And I'll just call this bus, and we want to set it equal to that, and then that means we can just do bus.addListener there, and we can also use iteminit.items.register, and you'll see that takes in a iEvent bus, which will be the bus. And that's it. We now have an item registered. However, it's not going to have a texture, it's not going to have a model, and it's not going to have the name that we want it to have. So, inside our source main resources, that is where all our assets will go. So, we need to actually create an assets package in here. Make sure you spell assets right. I very commonly see people will put like assets or attets and silly little things like that. Typos like that are quite common, so if you do get a texture error, make sure you check your spelling. It's very important that you get everything spelt right, and this must be lowercase. Everything in the assets must be lowercase. So then we create a new folder, and this will be dot and then our mod ID, which, as we did in the first tutorial, was just tutorial. Now yours probably will not be tutorial, and you can check in the main class right here. So ours is tutorial. Then we want to create 3 packages in here. We want .models. We also want .textures. And we want lang. Now let's just go through these. So the lang will basically be for all of the language files, and this is where we set the name of our item, what we want the name to look like in game, since we obviously can't put spaces or any special characters in the item init. So we have to specify it in the lang, and this obviously allows for localization, so you can have it for different languages. Now to do this, you just create a new file in here, and this will be en_us or gb or fr_fr or whatever. Just make sure it is a valid country code .json, and in here we just need the object, and then we have our JSON. So this will be item dot and then our mod ID, so tutorial dot and then our item name, which was example_item. Now once again, this is something you do need to make sure you get correct, otherwise it's not going to work. Now in this second string here, in the value, it's basically what you want this item to be called. So mine is just going to be example item, and obviously you can put whatever symbols in here you want as well, if you want to have symbols. That is just where you localize it. Obviously if you then want to do another language, you simply just create a new file, so fr_fr, which will be the French one. I think you can also have ca_fr, which is like Canadian French. I think that might be completely wrong, but I can have, for example, en_gb.json, which will be the Great British lang, and in here we once again just have the same thing, so item.tutorialmod dot and then our item name, so example item, and then we can just call this example item. Obviously for things like this it's going to be the exact same, but yeah, pretty simple. I'm actually going to delete that GB one because we don't need it. Okay, then we have the models. So this is where all the models for our items and our blocks will be. So in here we can create a new package, and we can call this .item. Make sure it is singular, not plural. And I'm also going to create another package for .block, as we're going to have block models in the next episode as well. So in our item package we want another file, and this will be for our item model. So this needs to be once again the name of our item, so example_item. And if you get this wrong, if you get this name wrong, then it's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you get it the exact same as what you named it in your item init. So that is a JSON, of course. And in here you can go ahead and get this file, which I have in the description, and this is just a template for your JSONs, for your item model JSONs. So I'm just going to run through this JSON really quickly. It's a very simple JSON. So we basically have the parent right here, which is what this item model will parent off of, and we just want a generated item, which is the plain item parent. And then we define the textures. Obviously you can have multiple layers, which is why we have layer 0 right here. And obviously if you wanted, let's just say layer 1, then we can do blah blah blah. I will be covering that in a future tutorial. And this just specifies the path of where the texture is. So it starts So it knows it's in assets, so we don't need to specify assets. So we start from our mod ID, which is tutorial, and then we put a colon, since everything after that it knows it goes into textures, so we don't need to specify textures. Then we have to specify that it is in the items section of textures, which we'll create in a minute, and then it is the item name, the texture name. We don't specify the file extension because it already knows it is a PNG. So let's just exchange some of these little values out. So obviously our mod ID is tutorial, and our item name, I'll create that in a second. I'm just going to create the package for the textures. So we have items, make sure these are plural, it's very important these are plural, and then we have blocks, and I'm also going to create another one actually for entities. Actually, I'll create another one as well for GUIs, and we will be using those ones in future tutorials. So now we can go ahead and create our texture. Now on my desktop I have the texture I'm going to be using. I'm a professional artist, of course, as some of you may know, so this is going to be a very well made texture. I definitely put a lot of time into it. You can see I have it named yellow thingy, so what I could do is just put yellow thingy. However, I'm actually going to rename this. It's better to keep it the same name so we don't get confused with what JSON it belongs to and don't mess that up. So now we can just put example item, since our texture is named example item in the items package. So yeah, you can have it in a package called item instead, but just to make sure that we're not getting confused between our models and our textures, I prefer to have textures as plurals and have models as singulars. It just makes more sense. If you wish to do it, if you wish to have them both singulars, that's fine, but this is just how I intend to do things. It's a lot cleaner and it stops people from getting too confused. Now I would like to mention, if you dragged in a texture into the actual file system, so if you dragged it into source main resources, assets, tutorial, textures, items, if you dragged it into here instead of into Eclipse, you will need to actually go ahead and right click this assets and go ahead and just refresh, and that will make sure it updates. Now that is actually it for this items tutorial. We can now go ahead and run the game and we should see it working. Okay, so as you can see, I am in the game, and if we go into the miscellaneous tab, which is where we set our item, we can see our example item, and if it all worked, we should have a texture working perfectly fine. Now if you do have a purple and black checkered pattern, make sure you read the latest.log, and I will show you where that is. So if you open your file system and you open your mod folder and you just go into the run folder and you go into logs and you just want to give it a refresh, and you open this list log right here, you can look at it and you're looking for a texture error. It may not, you know, you can do a searching, otherwise you find probably a file not found exception, you have to be a JSON exception, so you want to choose, and it will be in here. So if not, just stick it will be in here, so you can search it. And yeah, that should be pretty much it. I mean, yeah, if it doesn't have a name, just make sure that your lang file is in the correct place. So that is obviously assets.modid and then lang and then in_us.json. So that is it for this one. In the next one, I'll be covering either blocks or advanced items. I'm not sure which I'm doing first, but yeah. So I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.